let's say that you have a patient, and we're going to just follow the W path standard here really quick, not my methods, we're going to say the W path. So estradiol, you get it back, it's 100. To me, that's too low. I like it over 300. But W path likes them 100 to 200, so they say that's okay. Great, all right, everything's fine, keep transitioning, have a good day. I get your estrone back, and while your estradiol is 100, this is 500. Most cis women are really around 100, never over 200 ever. Their physiologic range never goes that high. So, what's up with that? Oh, I better lower your estrogen. Yeah, your dose is not enough. Here, you don't have enough estrogen. I need to increase it to get you closer to 200. Oh, nope, you have too much. I have to decrease your dose. Oh, nope, here's your total estrogen. This is pretty much peak ovulatory levels. This is fine. Depending on which lab you ordered and how you looked at this patient, you would come to the wrong conclusion. Which is why my whole point is estrone is a key component that you need to measure when you're looking at this. Estrone also is important to measure in any of your women that have had breast cancer or a thrombotic event, because it is implicated in the development of both. So, as we talked about here, the effective estradiol level in this patient is much lower than 100 picograms per milliliter. So let's imagine this. All right, so we got these chairs over here, okay? These are estrogen receptors. So let's say we have 10 guys up here wearing estrogen shirts, and they're like, I'm estradiol, 10 of them. And then I have 50 wearing estrone shirts, and we play musical chairs. What assortment of people are you going to get in there? I mean, obviously, 5 out of 6 chairs are going to be occupied by the people wearing the estrone shirts, because there's way more of it. But they both bind to the receptor. It's just that when the estrone binds, it only gives 4% of the effect. Subsequently, the irony of this is that giving transgender women who have this mutation estradiol creates an enormous amount of estrone in their liver, which then competes with the estradiol for the receptor binding site. So they start transitioning and then stop, because they get the initial feminization burst from estrogens, effectively, and then they can never get past that. They just get stuck. And the reason I dreamed this up is I'm like, why are people keep saying this, shots are better, I couldn't transition until I went to shots. I'm like, what would the difference be between oral and shots? Like, I don't get it. And I started looking into the biochemistry of this until I finally dreamed this up with Sigrid, who I quoted at the beginning of the lecture, who I gave credit to. Brilliant woman. But anyways, the relative speed of the enzyme, the 17-beta-hydroxysteroid oxidoreductase and hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, is interchangeable. So depending on where your mutations are, how many allelic polymorphisms you have in either direction, you're going to either go towards this end of the reaction or the other end. And this is important for transitioning. What's really weird is that I have found elevated estrone levels in transgender women who later went on to have screwed up ratios in this problem before they started transitioning. Meaning their body was taking, when they had non-elevated levels of total estrogen. Their total estrogen is like borderline high or normal, but their estrone is high because they're shunting into this. Now, I think that this is particularly interesting because I have previously been like, estrone's bad, no, terrible estrone. I've been doing that for years once I discovered this. What I recently figured out was that the patients that I started on pills that I switched to shots ended up having better feminization and larger end-stage breasts than the patients I started on shots. And I couldn't figure out why that was. And so I started to think about it, and when we talk about thelarchy, which is the development of breasts before menarche, thelarchy is the development of the breast bud and then its initial formation. That comes from the adrenal glands primarily, from estrone being released in the adrenals. After that happens, eventually there is an inversion when the ovaries kick on, and then you start to progress to Tanner 3, Tanner 4, then you start cycling and you having a period, and then you progress to Tanner 5 and the breasts round out. So I realized, maybe this would be better. So I actually let my patients stay on oral pills even if they have a crappy ratio for 6 to 12 months, then I switch them. Because effectively I'm mimicking thelarchy in a cis girl who would go through the same sort of thing. What's really interesting, and I have yet to totally suss out the mechanism for this, I've had patients that have been on shots for an extremely long time frame, like 3, 4, 5 years, where they are considered done. This is as far as they're going to progress, no more further feminization. And I added an oral dose of 2 milligrams at bedtime, swallowed, not sublingual, not buccal, swallowed, deliberately creating estrone. And all of a sudden they start progressing again. Despite the fact that their estrone level goes up against this ratio. It almost seemed contrary to my theory, but I believe the mechanism for this is that the estrone is actually uptaken into the cell and converted to a different form called E1S, estrone 1-sulfatase, or sulfate. The sulfatase enzyme is the thing that does it. And that form, E1S, hangs out and does nothing. It's sulfated, it just chills. but it can be pulled immediately and then converted to estradiol intracellularly. Now, the serum drifting around estradiol around your body, yeah, that's great that you have that and you have a high level, but it doesn't do anything unless it's inside the cell. This is picked up easier and taken into the cell. So it acts as a reservoir for E1S, and in these patients who've been on shots a really long time, who might have a depleted estrone reservoir, it seems to re-trigger growth in them. So what I do now is when somebody's maxed out, like totally maxed out, I give them this oral dose for a month. And if they start progressing again, they start getting more breast development, I have a phrase that I say all the time, which is sore boob is more boob. If they're sore, they're growing. That's a general marker for it. If they develop tenderness again, then we continue with this. If they don't, I don't do it past a month. All right, so as I talked about, I start them all that way. If the ratio is poor, I switch them to injectable. If the ratio is good, they can be maintained that way. I'd say, even since I would say about half now. I really should update this. I used to say about a third to a quarter, but I'd say about half of them have this genetic issue where they just cannot process it properly. There are the options for transdermal estrogen and implants. I rarely use these, mostly because I can never seem to get as high of a level as I would like, but I have a couple patients who have the mutation with the estrone issue, and they are just terrified of needles. They just won't use them. They're just like, no shots. And I'm like, okay, well, you're stuck how you are, or this. And the option is either transdermal gel or usually 2 to 3 max dose patches simultaneously. There is also estrogen implants, but they're not approved in the US through any sort of like FDA okayed drug, like Testopel is the testosterone one. There isn't an estrogen one. But you can get it compounded at a compounding pharmacy and then do the same thing. It does exist in Europe.